Although I met my husband, Mike Wilson, at Berea, I did not talk about him in the video about Berea College because he really was not part of my college life. I am 2.5 years older than he was. But because his birthday was in March and mine in September, I was 3 years ahead of him in school. So he did not appear at Berea until my senior year. And at that time, I didn't pay much attention to him. He was just a new person who sang in the choir. There were several new freshman people. And the first time I really became aware of him, I was standing in line on a Sunday night. The choir sang every Sunday night. And I was standing at the water fountain in line, and I realized the person behind me was too close to me. He wasn't touching me, but he was in my space. And I turned around to look, and it was Mike Wilson. And at the time, I thought that was strange, but as I got to know him, spatial things were not something he was aware of. He often bumped into things, and I still have sweet little blue marks on my walls where his walker, even though the room was wide, he still rubbed the wall. But anyway, I realized then he was pretty nice looking. He had on a yellow sweater and gray pants. And, but I still was, he was just there. He was a pleasant person. But after I graduated, I stayed in Berea to teach because I was hired at the school where I did my student teaching. And so I got to know him better. And then when Wilderness Road opened, and we were both cast in that outdoor show at Berea, outdoor drama, I really got to know him pretty well. And we first were just really good friends. In fact, I had an apartment in Berea when I first started teaching, and he would sometimes bring his date to my apartment for an evening. He never had any money. His father died when he was 3, and it was a struggle for his mother. And every Saturday, she wrote him a letter once a week. It always arrived on Saturday, and she always included $1. And before you start laughing about that, let me remind you that coffee was 5 cents. So you could have a pretty good date for $1. You could make that last a week. The matinee on campus, the movie matinee on Saturday, was 10 cents. And if you went on Saturday night, it was 18 cents. There was a theater in town that cost a little more. I cannot remember how much because I didn't go very often. But anyway, he became my good friend. And then by the second year that I was living in the apartment in Berea, we had become more of a couple, and people recognized us as a couple. And so it just developed from there. And I laughed because he was always involved in singing. And I laughed. I said sometimes I felt like I was dating a male quartet because sometimes we'd go somewhere and he would be meeting them, and I would sit and listen while they practiced. And then I had a car. And at Berea, students were not allowed to have a car. You certainly couldn't park one on campus. Sometimes people who did have a car could hide it in town. I had graduated then, I was teaching. And so I had a car. One time they were filming a movie in Danville. It was called Raintree County. And they were looking for people to portray Civil War soldiers. And Mike heard about it. And so he and their quartet was called the Fuzzy Four because they had grown beards for Wilderness Road for the summer because they played Civil War soldiers in that, amongst other things. And so I took 4 of them to Danville for them to sign up for this movie. And it was a right important movie. It starred Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift and Eva Marie Saint. And while they were inside signing up, I waited out in the car, And they were very secretive. They wouldn't tell you where they were filming, but I saw the stars come out and get on a bus. And so the bus took off. So I left and left those men there and followed the bus till I found out where they were filming. Then I went back and picked them up, and we went out there. And because the some of the directors and other staff, when they saw these guys with beards, they said, "Oh, you all need to sign up." And they said, "We already have." And so they let us come in and watch them film. And they were filming a picnic down by the river. And so that was a fun day. But anyway, there was a lot of that going on. And then I left Berea, and when he was a senior, I moved to Louisville to go to graduate school. And during that time, we visited back and forth some, but I knew that he also was dating other people, but he still kept in relationship with me. And then we wrote a lot of letters. Phones back then, there was no such thing as a cell phone or a personal phone. And it was very expensive to call. You had to wait till 7 o'clock at night when rates went down a little bit lower, but it was still very expensive. Then he graduated because he didn't have enough money to go full time at Berea. He went half day part of the time, and so he did not graduate with his class in 57. He graduated a semester late, so he was categorized as being a January 58 graduate. And when he graduated, I was still in school in Louisville. I was getting my master's in Louisville at that same time. And he realized that he was about to be drafted. And so he went to the draft board and asked them when his number was coming up. And they said in about 3 months. And he didn't want to waste that time. So he joined the Army and was stationed in Fort Jackson in Georgia. And then he came to visit me in Louisville. And I was teaching in Louisville at that time. And then he was sent overseas to the Panama Canal Zone. And it was so beautiful there. And it was really a kind of a plum assignment. He got involved in the community theater, and he sang in the church choir, and he sang in a choral group, and they were learning the Mozart Requiem. And he was so excited. And so he wanted me to come to Panama. Now, the way we communicated at that time was he found someone who had a ham radio, and this guy could hook it up to the phone. So Mike would go to his house, and then they would hook it up. So I don't know how they did that, but they would call me and we could talk, but it wasn't private. And he was very embarrassed when he would say, "I love you." I can remember him being a little, because this man was sitting there operating the dials. But he wanted me to come to Panama. He had made some good friends through the Baptist church. He was studying voice with a voice teacher who was from Germany and had sung opera, and he thought she was top notch. So that year when school was out, I flew to Panama, to the Canal Zone, and I sublet a teacher's apartment who she had gone to Europe for the summer. And she was concerned because she didn't know what she was going to do with her car. And so Mike told her that we could take care of it. So I had a car and an apartment. And that's when it was a wonderful time. It was a beautiful part of the country. And I stayed there most of the summer, and I studied voice with Madame Spool. And she kept telling me I need to go to New York, but my ambition was not to go to New York. I was very happy teaching, and I had found out by then that teaching was performing. I just made my desk the stage, and I put on a show for these kids and every day. So I was happy with what I was doing. But when I left Panama, I sort of said to Mike, "This has gone on long enough." In the meantime, I had been to North Carolina. I had met his family. He had been to Tennessee. He had met my family. Um, we had all picnicked together at Berea when they would come to see Wilderness Road. And so I said, I'm settled in Louisville. Don't come there if you don't feel like that we need to get married. I just felt like it was time. This had gone on for a long time. So when he came to Louisville, I knew then that that was going to be the thing. When he told me that he was going to come to Louisville, I said, okay, we'll find you a place to live. So I picked him up. He came on the bus. And when I picked him up at the bus, I was prepared to help go look at the want ads. And he said, I've already found a place to live. And I said, how'd you do that? And he said, well, I met a woman on the bus. I was taken aback, a little put out, knowing how easygoing he was. And that was something that really had attracted me to him. He was so laid back and easygoing. And my father was real high strung. He was a wonderful father. And I don't mean to downgrade them at all, but he was not the kind of person I wanted for a husband. He made decisions without consulting my mother. And he was so proud when he bought new drapes, but they didn't match anything we had, and I didn't want that. So I was attracted to Mike because of that. And he had a very similar background to what I did. He had grown up in the Baptist church. He was from a family of about 5 children, and like I was. And so I felt very comfortable with him. But anyway, he said, I met this lady on the bus, and she's older. She's a widow, and her children are pressuring her to move into assisted living. And she doesn't want to give up her home. And I told her I was looking for a place to live, and so I'm going to rent a room from her. And so I felt a little better, and we went to meet her, and he moved in there. And fairly soon he called me and said, there's a little house for rent that's connected to Miss Trollinger's house. And I couldn't figure out how that was, but I went to see it. And these people wanted to build a second house for their in-laws, and the city would not let them build a second house. So they built an addition. And what they did was build a little house. It was 2 bedrooms, living room and kitchen, and a screened-in porch, and the bathroom connected it to the big house, but you couldn't get through to the big house. You had to go outside. It was a separate house, but it looked like it was connected. And so I moved in there. We got married, and we lived in that little house for 2 years. Mike was very proper, and he wanted to call my father and ask him if he could marry me. And my daddy, I'm sure no other fella ever called my daddy and asked. I was the only one who really had a wedding until my sister Mary. She got married after my father had passed away. But Mike called him, and he said he wanted to get his permission to marry me. And my daddy was the kind of guy that if he was put in a kind of an awkward situation, he would be nervous, he would make a joke. And so of course, I was grown. I'd been to graduate school. I had taught school for 2 years, and
living on your own.
I'm living on my own. But Mike wanted to do the proper thing, so he called and asked. And my daddy said, "Well, hell, she's 38. She can do what she wants to." I was actually 27 at the time, but so that was the addition. But my parents were very pleased with Mike, although my daddy could not understand how he could sleep with a crowd of people around. We did not know at that time how severe his sleep apnea was. But he could sit in a room when everybody was talking, and Mike would just go to sleep and sleep. And so anyway, I feel like I did meet him at Berea, but like I said, I did not include him in my video about the college because he was not really a big part of my life until after the college. But that's it. It was a wonderful, wonderful 64 years and 2 months that we had together. Oh, he was a wonderful father.